I didn't even get another beer. I just went in there and did the thing. Sarah worked an overnight last night, and so she's asleep already. And we're back. Talking about faith in all of its different forms and facets. And
there's a saying that every saint has a past, but that means that every sinner has a future.
Uh, 14 seconds in. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Home Podcast. What is sure to be one quite riveting episode where Kevin, say hey, Kevin.
Hey, what up?
Where Kevin has all of the knowledge and I just have a bunch of questions. These are my favorite episodes because there's no prep. I don't have to think about it. I'm sure, though, that it's going to be kind of mind-blowing because today's book is just called Jesus and John Wayne?
Jesus and John Wayne, yeah.
Okay, so let that one sink in. Let me tell you what let me tell you what I think it means because, try and put myself in the audience's shoes. But you did tell me a few years ago what it's about. So why don't you tell the people, Jesus and John Wayne, what is it?
Yeah, so I came across a book by Kristen Diz. I can't say her last name.
Wait, a girl wrote it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Dude, that's the whole point of the book.
Oh, is that it's about a girl?
No. So, my thoughts, let me just start from the beginning.
Okay, sorry.
I am obviously a white guy from North Alabama, grew up in a Southern culture, later on was a soldier, a red-blooded American guy, went overseas,
Fought a panther.
Yeah, fought a panther with my
Wears a
bare
raccoon
hand.
hat when he goes camping.
Yeah. But was a red-blooded American man. I mean, young man, and was very evangelical, very Christian, had conservative viewpoints on a lot of different things, on everything, actually. Believed that the Republican Party was the Christian party. I mean, just like everyone else, you know what I mean? And all of that started to really, really, really change before Trump, though. I mean, way before Trump, but Trump was definitely a reason for my thought pattern changing. Not to say it's immoral to vote for Trump, okay? And I specifically said that in the blog.
Yeah, write it down.
So I think for any reasons you vote for a political party or for a political figure, obviously there should be some political reasons for that. You know what I mean? Like if you're a physical conservative and you believe in, conservative government, great for you. That's great. If you're liberal, great for you. You know what I mean? Like there are political agendas behind both of those parties. What's really crazy is when one starts to say that one is a Christian party, and is a Christian agenda. And that's where it starts to get scary, because especially when the agenda is the way that it is, or framed the way that it is. Okay, so I'm kind of rambling on that,
Bring us back.
Yeah, bring it back. So I started working at the Downtown Rescue Mission. I started working with some homeless people. Saw some things that I'd never had seen before in my life. As a white dude from North Alabama, was starting to see poverty, starting to see racial relations that I'd never seen before, and my eyes were open. I mean, and I started to change. I started to change my perspective of things, of how the world is working, and, not necessarily who's right or wrong, but who's maybe not wrong. You know what I mean? Not strongly saying who's right, but no longer saying who's wrong. And I came across this book called Jesus and John Wayne, and it was about that. It was about this rise of the toxic masculinity and the historical data and story behind that, of how we got there. And so, yeah, that's what the book is about. I mean, it goes through a lot of the evangelical leadership and how they pushed an agenda for what they called the moral majority, and ultimately made us think that the Republican Party was a Christian party. So that's it.
Okay, so Tell me more. Okay, so John Wayne, cowboy actor,
Yeah.
boots, Marlboro Red, cowboy hat, badass dude, gun on his hip. I imagine he goes to church every Sunday.
No.
So tell me, like, I mean, I'm talking about like the image of John Wayne. That
Yeah,
must be.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not talking about like the dude that he really was.
Yeah,
So yeah, dive
yeah.
into that.
Yeah, so she used John Wayne as kind of a figurehead of like what we consider Americana to be, or America to be, or really masculinity to be. And that's really what we've thought of. I mean, my grandfather used to watch John Wayne movies when I was a kid, and I remember coming
Yeah,
in
me
there
too.
and thinking like, this guy's a badass
Yeah,
cowboy, you know?
yeah.
But through all of that, we got a very strange view of what a man is, and really from some guys that were not the men they like projected to be. Like for instance, like a lot of the guys that were warmongers,
Mhm.
and the guys that wanted us to go to war multiple different times. They didn't fight in war.
Mm.
They were not like these war heroes. She even shows that, like Billy Graham was one of those guys who was a draft dodger, and then later on was really key in pushing a war agenda. There's just some weird stuff that, like, if you start looking back on it, it was like, man, y'all are pushing this view, this toxic view of masculinity, but you're really not that.
Mm.
That typically follows throughout history of America, especially in the 40s to now. You start to see this idea of what a real man is, and basically it's a patriarchal view of manhood, and that the man is the leader of the house, and that everybody submits to him, and it's a complete bullshit view of manhood.
Is it so? Let me bring this back. Is the basis of the book that our vision? I'm lost. Is it that our vision of Jesus or Christianity is like John Wayne, but that Jesus was nothing like John Wayne? Is that the point?
Yes, it's basically like, if that really American men, or Christian American men, have chose to try to look like a John Wayne figure rather than Jesus. And that if we really reflected who Jesus was, it would look nothing like a John Wayne figure.
I like to imagine my Jesus with a tuxedo T-shirt because it says I'm formal, but I'm here to party.
And belting out Freebird.
Yeah, and also it's hard for me to imagine. Never imagined Jesus's hands before, but it's hard for me to imagine them not calloused. Like that's probably been the thought that's kind of stuck with me since you started talking. Is like, and maybe I'm missing the whole point of this, but if I were to like think about my Jesus, I like it. I like a calloused hands Jesus. That knows the meaning of hard work. And
Well, he probably did. And look, he was a badass. I mean, he was tough. We know he was tough. I mean, he's hanging on a cross, and he looks
but was
down,
he
and
tough before that? I mean, he's a carpenter, so he
yeah,
probably had did a
absolutely.
lot. I mean, he did a lot of work with his hands and stuff.
All right, so think about this. One of the toughest moments that you could think of with Jesus, at least for me, is that he's hanging on a cross, he's suffocating, and he looks down from the cross and sees John beside Mary and says, hey, take care of my mom, basically. That dude, that is a man. That is a profound masculinity that is impressive while he's suffering. But I think that there is a type of masculinity that should be glorified, but it's not this everybody's going to listen to me and I'm going to take charge type masculinity. It is this servanthood of and serving others, and a call to really be the least of these. You know what I mean? Rather than what we've kind of turned it on. I mean, think about this. Somehow our culture, and I think the world outside of the church has been really confused by this, but somehow Donald Trump became the Christian choice for president. Does that not seem strange to you?
Are you talking about the time where he said he grabs him by the pussy?
I'm saying, how do we take that guy? How do we get from that point? Like, how is that guy, like, all of a sudden the guy that, like, is the choice for faith? If you're a conservative, and that's the form of government you believe in, you're like, Trump's my man. I believe that he's the best in business. Okay. If you're a Christian and you're like, I'm pro-life, and because I'm pro-life, he's moving the needle on, promoting justices and conservative justices who will vote the same way that I do. That's one aspect of your beliefs, and I can respect you for that, for voting for him for that. But when we like totally baptize him
Yeah, I
and his
wonder if the rest of the
platform,
policies are, yeah,
that's where it gets insane. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like, and we start to, think that like his belief on immigration is a Christian belief, or
When the fuck did we get ice cream? I've never heard that one.
do what?
How can anybody turn that into any? That's a spin that I haven't heard.
It
Holy
just,
shit.
I don't know. It's
Okay,
just
so here's the core argument from the book. I chat GBT'd it. You want me to read it? I'm
great.
going to read it no matter what. Okay. White evangelicalism in the U.S. has largely traded the Jesus of Gospels for a rugged, militant, patriarchal ideal of masculinity symbolized by figures like John Wayne. So it's not Jesus versus John Wayne. It's just the symbol.
Yes, exactly.
This transformation didn't happen by accident, but through decades of deliberate cultural and political shaping. As a result, evangelical support for authoritarian nationalists, leaders like Donald Trump, isn't a betrayal of their values. It's the culmination of them.
Yes.
And so she's obviously left wing, hates Trump. And so she decided to write a book about it, obviously. But
okay.
okay.
I wouldn't say that's the reason. I would look, if any Christian, like if we're just truly honest with ourselves, like if you look at Donald Trump and you say he's the moral candidate, you can't.
I bet this book would be really popular in universities.
Yeah.
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 I bet a lot of the professors would want everybody to read it.
Well, and see, here's the problem is I know you're conservative and
I'm not. I'm making jokes.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we kind of fall in the same. I think we fall in the same boat politically. Honestly,
Yeah.
is where I used to say I was a Republican. That was where I used to land. Am I today? No, not at all. Am I a Democrat? No, not at all. I'm not either.
Yeah.
Do I think that both parties do show some gospel truths? Absolutely. As a believer, should I, do I think that we should defend the life of babies? Absolutely. Do I think that we should defend the lives of immigrants? Absolutely. I mean, like there are these gospel truths on both sides of the aisle, and I think we as believers should not be identified with either platform.
Yeah, right.
In
Let's
faith.
just leave it there. So I think that I agree with you. The one shouldn't inform the other. I don't think, or it shouldn't be like I'm Christian, so I'm Republican.
Yeah, I think you can
And I'm
be.
just gonna go red all the way down the all the way down the score sheet when it's time to vote, and that's okay. I'm not picking at anybody who does that, but I'm anyway. It doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about politics that much, about my politics that much. So I'll just keep reading. So some primary points that are in the book: evangelical masculinity was rebranded. That's the first point. So what I told ChatGPT was like, give me the arguments that are presented in the book. So the primary points: evangelical masculinity was rebranded. The traditional image of Jesus as meek and sacrificial was gradually replaced by a warrior Jesus.
Yeah.
I've never seen warrior Jesus, but I imagine I'd like it.
Well, you're Methodist.
Yeah.
And
it
that's
says
probably what. Yeah.
aggressive and willing to fight. Warrior Jesus is tough, aggressive, and willing to fight. And evangelicals embrace cultural icons like John Wayne as models of Christian manhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it says power over principle. I just come from like deep country. You and I have similar backgrounds. Granted, I grew up in Miami, but my family is just like from the damn holler, Southern Baptist. This is like so ingrained. Like, so my grandpa, who I think of as like the godliest man that I knew, wore boots and big ass belt buckles and cowboy hats to church. Like his Sunday best was like a John Wayne look. And
Look, and there's
he had, like all of these things that are now symbols, I guess, for me. I would have never put two and two together, but I don't think he was faking that to be more godlike. I think that's just how he
no,
was.
no, and I don't think that that's bad. I don't think it's bad to be masculine. I don't think that it's bad to like be tough. I
Yeah.
think that sometimes that toxic masculinity is way different from real masculinity. Like I'll give you an example. One of the toughest men I ever knew in my life was my grandfather. Yet he was also one of the meekest men I've ever known in my life. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And so I think that there is this beautiful blend of like a guy who's, willing to be tough when toughness is, when toughness is needed, but also willing to be meek and to be a servant.
Yeah.
There's something beautiful about that. That's the way that I see Jesus as, honestly, is not like this.
Yeah.
I don't see Jesus as a pushover. I don't see Jesus as this like soft, like,
He'll pop you straight in the mouth.
well, I see him as, strong, he had strong convictions. Obviously, he turned over tables, but then he
But
also
one
served,
time.
huh?
One time. Why do people think about that? Why do people talk about that? Like they've never
Well,
been up before.
and he got into, pretty heated dialogues with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I mean, there were moments where he stood his ground, but at the same time, he was such a servant and such a man.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't, that toxic masculinity is where like it's this authoritarian, like, I'm the man type,
Right.
approach. And that's not really even toughness,
Yeah. I think that as dudes, we're so used to like, especially in the past, like holding the burden of, taking care of the family and yada yada, that in today's world where like your wife probably makes more than you kind of thing,
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of flipped on its head. But the money is the power. I mean, almost always. And no matter what anybody has to talk about. But this
Well,
lady, I can tell, like, I don't know if I would grab a lunch with her or anything like that. She reminds me of the people who say that The Godfather should be a banned movie because it's all about patriarchy and misogyny. And I'm like,
yeah.
dude, it's like one of the greatest American novels ever written
Yeah.
and like widely known as one of the greatest accomplishments in theater, in cinema.
Yeah.
So what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, I think sometimes that I think sometimes we can't shut off people because we would disagree with a portion of what they'd say. Like I wouldn't agree with that at all. And there's probably a lot of things that I wouldn't agree with her on because she might take it, in my opinion, too far.
One step too far.
Yeah, but the thoughts that it creates and the questions that it makes me think, I think were good when I read the book. Did I
Yeah,
agree with it
I think it's
wholeheartedly?
good to have something that challenges you. You don't have to agree with all of it.
No, not at all. But
That's productive reading.
yeah,
That's
but you
productive
can
reading.
say like, wait a minute, she is right about this. Like there is some toxic
Yeah, it's like,
masculinity. Do I
do I
agree?
think of
Do
it this way? Yeah.
Do I agree that we should throw out everything like this? No, not at all. I mean, I think that boys should be tough. I
Yeah.
mean,
Out of 34 classic John Wayne films, I don't think we should really get rid of any of them.
no.
Well, there's some that need to be just, but anyway. All right, let's read the next three because I think this reminds me of when you said 30 seconds ago, maybe she takes it one step too far. So here's the next three bullets that are the primary points of the book. Politics and nationalism, misogyny and patriarchy, race and white supremacy. So let's dig in. Politics and nationalism. Evangelicals embrace a right-wing political view, including militarism and nationalism. What was it? Hit with a big stick or whatever. This is entwined with their faith identity. This fusion paved the way for strong evangelical support for leaders like Trump, seen as a protector of Christian America. Misogyny and patriarchy. A consistent theme is the reinforcement of traditional gender roles, male authority, and marginalization of women. We can go back and watch the tape. I don't know how often I guess gender roles are probably addressed, but marginalization of women, we have to see how much that comes up in John Wayne movies. I like to think of my John Wayne as somebody who, was ethically higher than treating a woman, marginalizing women. I don't like using that kind of terminology when I think about John Wayne.
Like chivalry.
I don't even think that many, I don't know, this is a touchy subject, but it's kind of one of those things like marginalized women, okay, or take racism for example, like you can grow up your whole life and you've like never ran into racism until you're 30 and then you actually see it like right in front of you and it's happening. So like the whole like misogyny, like overpowering male authority, marginalization of women, either those things happen and it's so ingrained you don't even realize it's happening. It almost is like subliminal. And it
Yeah.
happens so much to me that I don't recognize it, or I've never recognized it for real. Like with like
Yeah.
like when I think about my family or the people that I've hung out with, like I don't remember ever like recognizing that or being like, yeah, dude, like we do this.
Well, I'll give you an example. Yeah. So I think sometimes we only see our certain perspective and don't realize that there are other experiences and perspectives that shape people's views. So, like for instance, being married and being in a relationship, I never saw it as like the woman's role to make me a plate. You know what I mean? Or like, some of those marginalized. I know too, based off of your relationship, knowing you, I know that you don't think that way either. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
those are not, but there are people that do that. And like for instance, when me and Jackie started dating, I think she assumed like she had to cook for me and she had to like bring me a plate
Mhm.
because of past experiences and past relationships. And I remember thinking like, whoa, 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 like you just cooked a meal for me. Why are you bringing me a plate? Like
Yeah.
I'll serve you, like, and she was like, what? Like, but the reality was that she was exposed to a toxic masculine patriarchal view that me and you, like, we that doesn't even seem like a reality to us. You know what I mean? Like the fact that
Yeah.
a man would
Right.
actually assume that. But there
Yeah.
are actually men out there who think that way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I think some of that is probably a pushback to that type of, perception of like, well, the
Yeah.
woman's gonna make me a sandwich, and
Deeply rooted and ingrained in human nature is yeah, like since the beginning of time. I like
and
to
you're
imagine that cave people, had to learn to work together and they valued each other equally.
and see,
Probably cavemen
yeah,
probably thought about women as more because like, oh my god, this miracle of, you know what I mean, like these babies are coming out of this is a miracle. You know what I mean, like
and
I can only imagine.
I think for men like us who view that as this relationship working together and an equal partnership of like, and not this like overbearing authoritarian view of,
Yeah,
like for us, we kind of take sometimes those comments offensively because we're like, well, I'm not like that. But the truth is, there are men like that. Like
yeah,
there are literally men. And sadly, the men who need to probably read a book like that would never read a book like that because they
yeah.
can't read books. But
Yeah. Okay. So the TLDR on this, and then we'll wrap
they're
it up.
like, I will read a Playboy, you know? Anyway.
Evangelicals didn't lose their way by supporting authoritarian figures. They followed a path that's been paved for them for decades. It was shaped by a desire for cultural power. I don't really understand that one. A redefined image of Jesus as a warrior. I guess so. I don't know how did we get there? How did yeah? I guess you have to read the book.
You got to read the book. I mean,
I
it's the
get what
moral
you're saying, but I
majority.
struggle to connect those 2 points. Like let's just use John Wayne as an example. When we say the path was shaped by a desire for cultural power, a redefined image of Jesus as a warrior, and a patriarchal nationalist worldview, I haven't made that connection yet, and I know she does in the book because this says it, between like pop culture and why pop culture would be interested in putting John Wayne's in front of us so that our view of Jesus changed. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, those two things are disconnected. To me, it's more like the way I think about it would be like not a cultural push to make us think a certain way, but just like naturally, because, for example, somebody like John Wayne in the movies would be seen praying or talking to priests or like, going to church, we began to connect those two ideas. But I don't necessarily look at that as like it was like a big plot. to
Well,
change the way that
there
Jews
was there was a political move. It was called the moral majority, and they really pushed for a connection to the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party saw a need for votes, and they saw evangelicals as a huge voting bloc, and so they
yeah,
were like, okay, well, we'll vote. I mean, it's politics. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like, but they saw evangelicals as a huge voting bloc, and so they began, look, and how do you get people to vote for you? You start doing things that they like. I mean,
yeah.
but you start doing it without really a connection to those principles. You just
Yeah,
do
so
it
like
because.
plebes like you and me would never know that this was like some kind of huge plot, but eventually we got here and they got the votes, so everybody wins. Okay, so look. This last sentence is a sentence that I can get down with though for everything that this is, and I haven't read the book, but I can vibe with it, with what she was putting down. But this last sentence says, Jesus and John Wayne is both a cultural history and a critique of how faith has been politicized and masculinized in ways that often contradict its own gospel. And I feel like that is a thinker sentence right there.
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't say I agree with everything that she
Yeah,
says in the
yeah,
book.
it's cool. It's cool. We don't have to. But I do think that that one sentence is provocative enough to make you think a little bit.
But I will say this, if Trump doesn't like make you question on just a little bit, I mean, I'm not saying he's a good person to vote for, not saying he's a bad person to vote for. Either way, not even getting into the politics of it. The only thing that makes me go rut-row shaggy, like what in the world are we talking about, is like when they're like, he is God's choice. And you're like,
It's the people's choice, yeah.
yeah, like what?
But I will say an overwhelming majority of the people's choice. Even though he cheated on his wife with a porn star, paid her off illegally, became a felon in the state of New York, and still somehow gets to deny the nefarious activity he was into. But like besides that, he's so, it doesn't even matter. It's not a Trump thing. Like I've never connected religion with politics at all. So I just never have even really thought about it that way. So like it's just hard for me to like put it there in my head.
Well, and
Trump
I'm
and
glad.
religion
I,
has absolutely nothing to do with one or the other to me.
I'm glad you don't. I did and I remember when I was 18, one of the first elections I voted in was Bush Kerry, and I voted
Mm,
for George Bush. And the reason why I voted for Bush
right,
basically is
right.
because my preacher said that was the Christian vote.
Mm,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you just take it for what it is. It's like, okay, well, we're Christians. We vote this way. This is what it is.
There's nothing more Christian than a 4x4 F-150 chugging that gasoline 7 miles to the gallon,
That's her point.
with your
That's her point. That's her point.
with the window down and country music on and a fat lip
You
in. You're
just
on the way
gave
to
the
the.
point to the book
Well,
without
I
even
know, I
knowing
know,
it.
I know, I know. No, I knew what I was doing, Kevin. Yes, I know. But I did see you nodding your head like that when I started saying it. There's nothing
Yeah,
like a red dirt road, right? Americana and Christianity are very, very much intertwined from
it is
optically, you know,
optically.
optically. I mean, like if you saw somebody driving a Prius, you'd probably be like atheist. But if you
What
see
about a
somebody,
Subaru?
how beat up is it? If it's brand new,
Yeah,
they probably go to church for the kids and it's probably pretty light. But if it's old and beat down, definitely Baptist or Church of Christ. They hold on to things.
what about an old Volvo?
Old Volvo,
hmm Like an old one. Like I'm talking about, like
that's
the
like
old wagon.
day
Okay,
Adventist to me.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Homie, we
I
need to get
don't
off
see
of
that
here.
very. Yeah. Okay. If we don't, you're just gonna fall asleep, like literally in the middle of the thing,
Yeah.
because I found out
All
that's
right,
how you
dude.
do it. Okay, man. Talk to you later. Bye,
What's up?
everybody.
All right, man.